I'm going to talk a little bit about why security matters and what you should do about it. Security and tests have been bedfellows for a very long time. The core of the security function is a testing one. The security professionals tend to play devil's advocate. They tend to be contrarians. They tend to, in all of the good ways, of course, but also they tend to test all of their hypotheses. They need to validate what their assumptions are and be able to prove it with data. And so all of these things that I'm mentioning will resonate to all of you because, of course, these are also characteristics of everyone who tests. So it's always confused me as to why testing and security seem to be somewhat apart when I believe that they're very, very close to one another. I've been working in security for a long time. I've seen multiple phases of the security challenges, all the way from, network-based worms way back in the day, the early days of Wi-Fi, and all the way through to all of the web app and mobile attacks that we see today. But over that time, I've spent an awful lot of time testing. And so, I've been at Sauce Labs for almost 2 years. And one of the things that I've been focused on while I've been here is working with the teams to understand what value we can provide from a security perspective, because we all know that security testing is occurring inside of all of your organizations. It's a very important component of what's going on inside of your organizations. And it's not just important to build the confidence of your customers that your web app or your application or your website is working well for them and it's doing for them what they wanted to do. You also have to provide them with the confidence that nothing untoward is going on with those applications as well. So, ever-changing user landscape. There was a Gallup poll recently, took part in an event a few weeks ago, and this poll was mentioned, and I went and grabbed some data out of it just so that I could speak intelligently about it. And I thought that I would grab some of it and put it up here. The Gallup poll had to do with financial services and had to do with banking in general and how the innovation is occurring inside of that space and what impact it may have going forward. And so one of the outcomes that came from that particular the particular poll that they did, the study that they did, was that there's an ever-changing user landscape going on. As younger folk are growing up, users who are growing up in the mobile space, probably don't even have laptops, their first devices are going to be mobile devices. As they're growing up, they're not acting in the same ways as their older counterparts. So younger users, so it was mostly focused on millennials and Gen Z. Younger users will be the top banking users within the next decade. Now, we all know that there's going to be innovation inside of banking and financial services with, Bitcoin wallets and microfinancing and all the various ways that we can shift money around with the opening up of things like foreign exchange transfers and, obviously blockchain and Bitcoin are changing an awful lot of how funds are being moved around the world. But basically, the first generation digital natives, millennials, are most likely generation to use both online and mobile channels. And you can see the numbers there on the screen. They tend to use those channels more frequently than older generations. To be fair to the older generations, the technology wasn't there in the past. Some of us are old enough to remember going into a bank branch and meeting a bank manager and, writing ourselves a check. And those sorts of things, which are twee and don't really happen anymore in most societies. Well, we've all shifted, and these are all wonderful things, are wonderful innovations. But it does mean that these folks are growing up in this space where it's less tactile and it's less concrete. It's very much less brick and mortar than it has been before, and what that leads to is a somewhat fickle nature of that user. So users will increasingly, as a consequence, vote with their thumbs, and they can shift from a bank to a bank or a merchant to a merchant with impunity. I'll never meet my bank manager in my local branch, most likely going forward. And so whether I have my funds inside of one bank versus another, unless I have a mortgage or something like that, that might require me to have a longer relationship with a bank or a financial services firm, I might just shift from one to the other because the app didn't work or because they didn't have a feature that I wanted. And so this is part of the landscape that we need to bear in mind. The current security landscape is a little bit different. I want to talk just for a minute about that. Security challenges are growing. This isn't going to be a shock to any of you. I've been working in security for more than 23 years, and every single year the challenges grew. Every single year the number of breaches grew. Every single year the number of records that were lost through data breaches has grown. So the challenge it just seems to be getting bigger and bigger. The graph to the left is 0 days caught in the wild. This is from only a couple of days ago that got dropped out. We're not all the way through 2021 yet, but the amount of 0 days that have been discovered in the wild is dramatically increasing. 0 days, of course, are flaws in code that's running in production, and so or installed software that's running in production. And so obviously this on the rise means that we certainly have a quality problem somewhere. 1,291 data breaches so far this year. That is, again, so far this year, a 17% increase on all the data breaches in 2021. So through September 1, I believe this data is, so 3/4 of this year is already a 17% increase on all of the breaches of last year. And cyber attack compromise is similarly up nearly 30%. These arrows only ever go up, as far as I can tell, which is one of the reasons why we need to focus so much on quality. Security issues are a result of insufficient quality. There is a thought process out there. There's a debate that I've gotten involved in the past that's saying that security issues are different and they should be treated differently. I disagree. I think security issues are just an outcome of insufficient quality. Everything is code, infrastructure is code, everything is code, and the world is relying on your code, as we talked earlier. And so a security issue is just a more grave outcome of a lack of quality. It's a, you know, if a pixel on a site is slightly off and isn't the right color, or if a UX is broken or something like that, yes, that's a poor experience for customers and we would want to fix those things. But security issues are just like all those other bugs, except that the outcome might be that you're leaking data or that something on your backend is vulnerable, or you're allowing a user to do something that you really don't want them to do. Current state of security testing. Testing is perceived as a nice to have. It really is. I've been working with developers for 2 decades, and I know this. I spend a lot of time and energy trying to get them to focus more on security and to believe in it and to love it and to want to get better at it. But it is still perceived as a nice to have. So it's one of those things where you've got to build consensus. It's difficult to run DAST and IAST in CI/CD. DAST is obviously dynamic application security testing, and IAST is interactive application security testing. They're difficult to integrate, and it generally seems to be complex and expensive. It appears to be that way, not necessarily true, but some people hear security and they sort of either don't want to know or they're not interested in wrapping their heads around it. Security testing is not accessible to everyone. Tools generally are expensive. They're used by specific teams, requires a certain amount of domain knowledge to be able to figure out how to use them and then what to do with what you get from them. So it's not really accessible to a developer or a QA engineer. Using existing tools like OWASP Zap Proxy is built for security engineers. OWASP, the Open Web Application Security Program, an open source program that's been around for 20 years. In fact, they just had their 20th anniversary security conference back in September. I was delighted to participate in that. They built a Zap Proxy, which allows you to test code against the OWASP framework, which is an identification of vulnerabilities across web applications, and it gives you results. And so we want to try and demystify a little bit of that to a certain extent. There's a lack of tooling between security and devs. Again, security tests are generally run by security people. It's happening in a separate team. It's happening in a separate workflow. How is it overlapping? Is it overlapping? How can the data come back? How can we make it easier? Security testing is not done effectively. Vulnerability scanning and pen tests are the last step oftentimes. And those of you who've been in QA for a long time will remember many, many years ago, everybody would write all of their code, and then you would get like 2 weeks to test everything, and then you would find all these issues, and then it was a mad dash to be able to fix as much as you can before you went into production. Well, that's exactly the security experience. Like devs get it as far as they can go. They throw it over the wall to the security team. Security team finds all kinds of things, and then some of those things get fixed, and some of them don't. Right? You move into production nonetheless. So it's not effective. Security testing is run manually. It's done by a separate team, and security engineers are hard to find. Good security engineers are certainly hard to find. They're relatively expensive, and having them do rote, repeatable work is A, not interesting to them, and B, is not incredibly efficient from an economic perspective, right? If it's something that just be done over and over again, automate it, or it can be, you can make it easier to be able to do it so that you don't have to pay an expensive security engineer to do that kind of work. Then lack of knowledge sharing. Knowledge sharing is incredibly important. Is that, you know, when vulnerabilities are detected, everybody needs to understand how to be able to fix those things. And so demystifying some of these, you know, how some of these attacks work and so on is important, and sharing the knowledge so that, you know, literally a rising tide lifts all boats. When we improve the quality and the knowledge sharing that occurs within teams, everybody gets better. So what if we, it's a question I was asking myself as I joined Sauce Labs almost a couple of years ago, was what if we offered security testing? How difficult would that be? What kind of a proposition would that be? Would it make sense? Would that provide value? So we internally, leveraging OWASP's app, built a platform. We've been built this and been testing it over the past couple of quarters, which would provide the ability to perform security testing in our cloud as part of our services, and be able to provide you with the insights and the results, along with all of the other insights and results that we provide across visual and web and mobile and production monitoring and low code and all of the other services that we provide. It would be obviously easier to set up. It will be set up already for you, easy to scale, lots of parallelism. Again, it can happen alongside all the other tests that you're doing. And then obviously we have deep integration with all kinds of other testing, so it will be relatively easy. So what would be a benefit of testing using Sauce Labs? Well, we provide that abstraction layer for most of the common use cases, right? This would not be a solution to penetration testing, nor would it be a solution for your security engineering team. It would free up the security engineering team to be able to focus on harder problems to solve, more complex issues for them to be able to focus on. But the common use cases, certainly the ones, many of you will be aware of the OWASP top 10, right? So the Open Web Application Security Program has been maintaining a top 10, the top 10 biggest issues with web apps. They've been maintaining it since I think 2007 or 2008. And some of the terminology in the top 10 has changed, but the actual top 10 vulnerabilities themselves are almost the same. I think 7 of 10 are almost exactly what they were 10 years ago. And so, or over 10 years ago. It's just that we've got different technologies have emerged and we start to name things slightly differently, but generally speaking, they're around the same. So again, when we say common use cases, over the immense innovation that's occurred over the last 10 or 15 years, the web app security issues, the majority of them are still the same. So we're still struggling with the same problems we struggled with a long time ago. So a common use case is a powerful use case nonetheless. Of course, common not just meaning that it's not incredibly complex to understand. Common also means it's everywhere, right? So to help make testing more accessible, common use cases need to be abstracted behind a simple interface so that anyone will be able to use it. This can be in the form of a RESTful API, which of course can be used in various forms. You can use a command line interface or a web app or integrate it with CI/CD tools. brings the testing layer into the security automation conversation, right? As opposed to be throwing this over the wall to a security team, having them do their thing, and then how do they get their results back into your work stream? Maybe you've built integrations on the back end with some of those tools, maybe you haven't. But again, allowing all of these results and insights to be part of the already common flow of information between the teams would be incredibly useful. Would allow us to offer an opinionated but an up-to-date approach to scan and audit applications. We would be able to suggest, certainly different scans that might be appropriate or different things to be able to audit based on history. So obviously this would be a learning process, but and to be able to support a number of possible use cases, including API testing. Automated security scans. This is the cornerstone of basically any compliance program. Is that obviously compliance programs and again, in the financial services industry and the banking industry and so on, you're all used to the compliance requirements. Some industries are not, but compliance is growing. More and more are being required to do so. In fact, just recently the federal government is requiring deeper compliance for anyone providing services to any government entities. And putting penalties in there and punishment if you don't. But within financial services and banking, of course, we're not used to, this isn't new to us. I myself have worked at a bank before. And so I'm very, very aware of the compliance tax, if you like, that you're under. But the key to this is automated security scans. So the ability to be able to run your scans against a specific infrastructure or even an ad hoc infrastructure and be able to gather those results, and then to be able to obviously prioritize, but trend those results over time. And the way you prove for many of the compliance initiatives around security is you run the tests and provide the results, and the results prove how you operate and how secure your posture might be. Sauce Labs already runs so many functional tests today, and we gather significant information about our applications from our customers under test. This would allow us to provide suggestions for security tests to make sure that you are testing for the right things and that you're not missing anything. Security scans obviously can be run automatically. They can be enabled with one click. They can be scheduled. They can run continuously. They can run every night, every week, whatever cadence your compliance requirement requires, or whatever internal policy your security team has provided to you. The goal basically to make security scanning commoditized and the insights that come from those security scans, so that it isn't this, magic that happens behind the covers. It's not this, bespoke, unique thing that happens within the security team. It sort of demystifies it to a large extent, because security shouldn't be mystifying. It should be easily understood. It's, at the end of the day, it's logical. And so it should be easily understood by anyone in a technical role. Again, further benefit, inspection and reporting of scans over time. I mentioned this a moment ago, but the trending analysis is incredibly important. Having been a security leader for a long time, the most common question I'm asked by people above me in the food chain, boards, people outside, auditors is, are you getting worse or are you getting better? Are the investments, your CEO wants to know the investments that you're making in security, are they making a difference? All the while knowing that the security problem is growing, right? So you're in a little bit of a race, but things are getting bad. They're getting worse out there in the big bad internet. Are the investments you're making allowing you to catch up, or are you outpacing them? And being able to prove those sorts of things with metrics is incredibly important. Of course, they could trust that you're a professional, a security professional, and you've got lots of experience, and they can trust that, he or she or they know what they're talking about. So we believe them, but it's always nice to be able to provide a chart or be able to provide metrics and trending to be able to prove that things are getting better and not worse. So if you can see it, you can measure it. If you can measure it, you can provide a view, and people love pictures. So rather than having security engineers do the bulk of the work, discovering issues and filing bugs, and maybe there's integrations in place, maybe there's not. I've seen this administrative burden be fairly large through many organizations that I've experienced in. But you can expose threats early in SDLC and to everybody building the software. Oftentimes, security teams don't fix the issues that they find. More often than not, the issue is found, and then it's funneled back into the team that originally wrote that code or that's responsible for that platform or that microservice or that service. And so the security team discovers the issue, and then they open a bug and they send it back over and all that sort of stuff. The idea being that if we expose these things early enough, we can add awareness and education into the process. Again, demystifying the security issue and allowing the developers who are writing the code and developing these services to understand the flaw in what occurred. There's no blame to be apportioned. There's no such thing as 100% secure. But in understanding what actually occurred, we can build consensus and build fraternity, if you like, and be able to focus on these problems together and fix them together. Again, we'd have a log of all of the vulnerabilities found, and then we can actually go back in that log and analyze that and see what are the problems that we typically encounter. Are there specific areas where we're always finding issues? Are there specific types of issues that emerge all the time? And again, awareness and education, and maybe even the investment in a tool or a platform might actually solve some of those problems, as part of the analysis. Be able to provide detailed explanation for vulnerabilities. Again, demystifying these things. We want to make sure that everybody is understanding of the work that needs to be done, and there shouldn't be any magic to it. And obviously, in providing an explanation, you should be able to provide potential solutions to be leveraged going forward. Again, knowledge sharing. It's all about transparency. It has seemed somewhat counter to logic to think that security teams would be transparent, but the requirement now is that they must be. There's always going to be some information that's going to live inside of some security team that isn't obviously to be shared. But I think that the big focus to get security right and to make the improvements that we need inside of the security industry at large, and the requirement is for us to become much more transparent and bring everyone into the fold and do an awful lot more explaining and an awful lot less of handing things over and saying, you've got to fix this. I can't believe you made that mistake again. So you saw this slide a little bit earlier, and I shifted it a little bit. So from continuous testing to continuous security testing, the new era of DevSecOps, which many of you will have heard. Again, the traditional approach is shifting left, shifting right, getting better coverage, allowing for higher frequency and so on. But continuous testing allows you for higher release frequency, lowering your risk, higher quality. Low risk means more secure. So I tweaked this slide just a little bit for my own benefit to tell a little bit of a security story, which is that, again, you want as much coverage as possible. You want to be engaged with as many teams as possible, as continuous as you can be, and getting the insights that you need. You're able to learn from those insights and be able to inform your process in so many better ways, resulting in much higher quality for your customer, but also for a more secure deployment. How it all comes together, this is the sauce story, right? The single view across all of the entire SDLC to accelerate testing, allow richer insights and better collaboration among teams and better simplicity through the entire continuous improvement development. We've got various products, and some of which you will hear more about today. But I wanted to outline again, just down in the bottom, the security scans part down in the bottom left is something that we added a little while ago, and now we're able to talk a little bit more about how it comes together and how this continuous improvement will provide an awful lot more security throughout the entire SDLC. So let's solve security issues together. It really is about togetherness. I've seen over the years, security teams have been separate somewhat from most of the organization, in word and in deed. And I think that that's a mistake. I think that, in making sure that security is front and center and transparent, and inclusive, I think, is incredibly important. And it's the only way for us to be able to solve all these issues. They will never be efficient in a silo. So Sauce Labs automated security scanning. So we expect to be able to deliver a labs preview of our DAST solution in 2022. We've been working hard on this over the last couple of quarters, and we will be reaching out and inviting some of our customers to be able to help us along this journey to providing some security benefit as part of our platform offering. And we're really, really excited about it. I in particular am very excited about it because the more we discover doing the things we already do, the smarter we get, and the better quality our code is, the better experiences our customers have, and the more secure the internet gets.
Starting off for you, Justin, we have a question from Prashant asking, how can we recognize while doing security testing on our software products that it's sufficient testing for the product to protect from attackers, security breaches? So how do you know when it's enough?
It's a great question. And again, I referenced a little bit earlier, I can't tell you how many board meetings I've been in, but the most common question I get from board members is, are we doing enough? Are we doing as much as our competitors? And that's you can take that question and run it all the way down the stack. Am I testing enough? Am I going deep enough? Am I going wide enough? At the end of the day, it is about coverage, and we're talking about the entire SDLC is shifting left and shifting right and maintaining our focus, meaning that we get as much coverage and as many signals from as big a population as we can to be able to have those insights and be smarter about the entire view. The challenge with security is the scanning that occurs, so vulnerability scanning and all those sorts of things, they provide you with a baseline understanding of really what's going on. Because the scanning, generally speaking, will tell you about, it'll interrogate whatever you're scanning and tell you to a certain depth. And sometimes it's configurable, that depth. Those of you familiar with Nmap, amazing security tool, many, many, many years old. You can ask it to scan a host or a series of hosts or a network or whatever it is, and you can tell it how much data you want back, or you can tell it, how to interrogate those hosts and so on. So there's a little bit of configurability in there around how deep you want to go. But, over the years, I've done an awful lot of scanning. Some tools are better than others. Some tools are better with different code bases, and some tools are better for network than they are for web apps. So it's always been a bit of a security familiarity, if you like, or expertise around knowing which tool to be able to point at which property to be able to get the information that you need. We're trying to demystify that to a certain extent by focusing on common use cases and providing a specific baseline, saying that across your environment, we're looking for these types of issues, the most common issues found for web apps and mobile apps and so on the internet. And as far as those attacks go, we think that you're fine. You're always going to be able to hire a pen tester who's going to be able to come into your company and go much deeper and write custom code to attack specific parameters inside of your app or inside of your platform. And they're probably going to get further than the scan will. But it's about really setting a baseline and then just maintaining that baseline, which is effectively all you want to do from a compliance perspective. Compliance is simply saying, we're going to do this and then do it. And then you're going to come back and test me, and I'm going to prove that I did what I said I was going to do. So from that perspective, you're setting a baseline saying, I'm not going to be vulnerable to these issues, which are the most common ones on the internet, and then proving the fact that you're not. And then that can be incredibly useful in building everyone's confidence, but also in satisfying auditors and leadership.
Fantastic.
Good
Thanks
question.
for that. And yeah, thank you, Prashant, for the question. For the last minute or so here, Justin, I'm wondering if there's anything you can offer to our audience today in terms of actions they can take, one thing they can do, as we're talking about the fact that our QA and development teams and our security teams are siloed. And my understanding is we're looking at that as really the core of the problem, to not have that transparency that you're talking about.
Sure. Yeah.
What can we send folks off with? Yeah.
It's a great point, Susie. I mean, I would say as we seem to be coming out of emerging from the cave, coming out of this COVID craziness, reach out to your security team. Oftentimes they're distanced, either by reputation or sometimes by action. But oftentimes reaching out is a really positive thing. One of the things I like about the security industry in general is there's an awful lot of people in the security industry who like to teach, they like to impart knowledge. And it might not seem that way in the very beginning, but I think reaching out and getting engaged with the security team as simply as asking a question, or simply, say, hey, I'm interested in this, or I want this to be better. What do you think? Or, is there something you've got in place that I can leverage? Building that bridge is incredibly important. Again, security was very much siloed from almost every other part of the organization, certainly a couple of decades ago. But I think that those bridges have been built now, and everyone seems to be moving swiftly along and getting along an awful lot better. But I would say reach out and engage, show some interest, and I think you might be surprised by the reaction.